This week's episode of The Clear Out was recorded on the 14th of June 2023 at home in Wicklow. And it is an episode that looks largely at the idea of survival, of overcoming, of transcendence, of legacy. It also looks at what should define us, what defines one. Should we care about being defined? Should we care about who is doing the defining? I think yes, we should. And I also look at the idea of what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. I have a bit of an issue with that idea, and I tell you why later on in the episode. I talk a little bit about Tina Turner. I talk a little bit about the Irish singer who just passed away, Christy Dignam of Aslan fame. And before I get into any of that, I have a bit of a take on the recently concluded Succession. I spoke about it a couple of episodes ago, but I had some other thoughts that I hadn't shared that I thought, if you like movies and movie references, I draw a connection between a very famous other movie family and the horrendous Roys from Succession that you might find interesting. So yes, that's what's coming up. I hope you have time to listen, and if you do, I hope you enjoy it. I will see you around the corner. Cheers.
Ooh, not gonna change my mind, leaving the dream behind, keep my emoji inside.
Hi, my name is Dara Clear, and you're listening to The Clear Out. You're very welcome. How are you? Do you want to take a beat? Take a moment? Do you want to catch a breath? Do you want to go and compose yourself? Come on, pull yourself together. Or pull yourself apart. Whichever your preference is. Yeah, listen, it's you. You can do what you want, can't you? With you. Yeah. It's okay. I'm waiting. I'm not at all concerned here. I'm not going to be harried or hurried or worried. Just take that breath. Take a long, intentional breath. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. Feels nice. Are you all right? Are you okay? Yeah. When people ask you, how are you? How's it going? Do you really tell them? Do you tell them the truth? Or do you go, I'm grand. I'm grand. It's a great catch-all. A great catch-all phrase that we're very devoted to here in Ireland. Grand. It can mean so many things. I'm okay. I'm terrible. I'm not good. I'm fine. I'm on the brink of a total breakdown. I'm really good. Grand. It's a nice avoider. How are you? I'm grand. Can we talk about this? No. I'm grand. It's grand. Let's let it go. It's grand. It's fine. Anyway, how are you? Are you grand? Yeah, I don't know. I reckon there's always something going on. The internal space, there's always something going on. And all we have are moments. All we have are moments. You might have a day, you might have a week. You can go, no, that was good. That was a good moment. That was a good day. I enjoyed that. And then other stuff takes control of the reins, the internal reins, and reminds you, there's other things that lie here unaddressed, untended, ignored, overlooked, deliberately overlooked. But we always know. That's the simple truth, isn't it? We always know. Deep inside, we always know. I'm really avoiding that. I'm not looking at that thing that needs to be looked at. And often it's because it's just too scary. It's too confronting to stare at, to look at, to face up to. It's too confronting to accept that work needs to be done. But typically, work always needs to be done. There's always something to do. And it doesn't have to be something onerous or masochistic. It doesn't have to be something brutal and self-abasing in the spiritual sense. I think I referred to something in that area last week when talking about the zero-sum game of alcohol for some people. If you're, I'm not going to repeat myself. Go back and listen to last week's episode if you want to hear what I have to say on that. Yes, so here we are. Another week gone. My voice somewhat restored to its normal timbre. And I think the reason for that is we had a little bit of rain over the weekend and it dampened down the pollen. And that has helped. My symptoms, my hay fever symptoms, have been less annoying this week. And long may it continue, I say. There's a foxglove stem, two foxglove stems, stalks, outside the window here with those lovely purple bells hanging off them. Yeah, nice. Suddenly green growth everywhere. Very nice. Anyway, I was rhapsodizing about the Irish summer last week. I'm not going to, as I already said, I'm not going to repeat myself. I'm not going to go there again. But it has been particularly nice. It has been particularly nice. We had the opportunity to spend a couple of days in Connemara over the weekend. And my God, it was beautiful. So nice. We got to go over and spend some time with some old family friends. And it was lovely. It was really nice. It was a road trip. We brought Pepper the dog. That was fun. She was really well behaved. I was so impressed with her. And we got to swim in the Atlantic Ocean in pristine water. Oh, so good. And we got to break bread together with old friends. 3 generations. The youngest person there was 2.5 or 2 2/3 perhaps. And the oldest person was 81, heading for 82. And that person is living with the effects of Alzheimer's, and there's a lot of repetition, but the family rally round, gather round, get involved, and it was nice. It was a nice thing to be a part of and to observe. And these are people I've known since I was a very little child. So it was it was lovely, really, really nice. And it's just lovely to get away to the west of Ireland, and Connemara itself is particularly special. It's got its own energy, its own lovely landscape, its own lovely flora and fauna. And in fact, on Monday morning, I was out early just doing my morning thing, and it was very quiet except for the sound of a couple of cuckoos, which sounded lovely, just coming across the air. And on the previous morning, at a similar time, I saw on a rocky outcrop a hare. Yes, and I don't mean a stray hair off a human head, a follicle blowing in the wind. I mean the animal, a hare, the larger cousin of the rabbit. For all I know, that's a misnomer. They may not be related at all, although it's hard not to think they are. But the hare has its own energy, its own sort of unbiddable wildness. It's not sort of slaughtered with docility like rabbits tend to be. We tend not to anthropomorphize. I've struggled with that word before, haven't I? Anthropomorphize? Is that the full word? I bet you I've made a mess of that. But a hair, it's just a little bit more distant, aloof, unknowable. And I was quite thrilled to see one just hopping along the rocky outcrop with the ocean in the near distance. So fantastic. And actually also while I was swimming, I saw an amazing, I don't know what it was, just floating in the water, like a glowing purple oblong shaped thing, maybe 5 inches tall, an inch wide or 2 inches wide, but sort of glowing, vibrating, bright purple. I wasn't sure if it was some kind of anemone or a jellyfish of some kind, perhaps, but it was very striking and very tropical in for Irish waters, I would have thought. I can't imagine the temperature was much more than 14, but it was the water clarity was just fantastic. So that was lovely, and it was great seeing my daughter mixing it up with the other kids, both younger and older kids, and to see my daughter just with this great confidence getting into the ocean. She sort of found her feet last year getting into the sea and getting into the river after a couple of summers of drama and stress trying to get into colder water. But she has a little wetsuit now and she just bounded in and had to be dragged out of the water. She was having such a good time. So that was nice. Anyway, here we are. And I was going to say, actually, before I get into the main thing, I realised I had one other thought about the final season of Succession, and it was brought home to me with the final episode and the latter moments of the final episode. And all I will say, this won't really qualify as a spoiler, but Kendall, the son, there's a shot of him just walking, wrapped up well in his coat and facing out to sea, maybe looking over the Hudson actually, so not really the sea, but the way it was shot, it just reminded me at the time, and I meant to mention it when I was talking about Succession a couple of episodes ago. I'm referring to the HBO series Succession. That's been a cultural phenomenon. In case you don't know what I'm talking about, but that final scene of Kendall reminded me of Al Pacino playing Michael Corleone in the Godfather 2 when he's on Lake Tahoe. And it was very evocative of that, just the colour palette that was used. And it was only afterwards I was thinking, oh yeah, okay, so if the Corleones were meant to be flipping the idyllic American family on its head, the immigrant gangsters who want to go legitimate but are up to their armpits in blood, but Pacino's Michael Corleone, he's kind of in on the hypocrisy, he's in on the joke, and indeed articulates as much in the famous scene at the start of Godfather 2 where he's sort of trying to negotiate terms with a very self-satisfied politician who does come to a sticky end later in the movie. But Pacino's like, yeah, we're part of the same thing here, you and I. But in any case, the Corleones, that kind of epic, that saga of trying to escape the blood-soaked genesis of their line, of their family, of their fortune, trying to legitimize, and coming undone in very Shakespearean or even kind of Greek tragic ways, universal, age-old tragedies befalling the family, brother against brother, father, men blinded by ambition, vanity, arrogance, certitude, determination, resolution. And when I saw Kendall at the end of Succession, I just thought, oh, okay, so maybe this is the other representative, tragic or doomed or ill-starred American family. And again, you have the immigrant, the sort of the venal, amoral immigrant patriarch, in the Brian Cox character, at the head of the Roy family, and then the children trying to live up to the legacy, but they don't really have a Michael Corleone. They don't have that grim, determined resolution, the ruthless resolution that Michael Corleone had. So that was so well captured by Al Pacino in those early, in the early part of his career, when he was still capable of being very still and very quiet. And then the reborn Al Pacino in his later career got so noisy and shouty and demonstrative. But there's no one, I don't think he's ever been more chilling than as Michael Corleone in The Godfather Part 2. A very, very sinister, dark character. And all the more so because we know where he's come from. But that's all I'm offering. I'm just offering that maybe the Roys in Succession, they're the equivalent of the Corleones. And maybe, I don't know if Kendall is Michael and maybe Shiv is Sonny and Roman is Fredo, the crying one, the one whose ineptitude reduces him to tears, or whose tears reduce him to ineptitude, one or the other. But yeah, so there you go. That's my take. It's another family epic, another family saga for the ages, and corruption of a very different kind, gangsterism of a very different kind, venality and criminality and amorality of a very different kind to what we saw in particularly the first two Godfather movies. Although maybe The Godfather 3 would be an interesting link, dealing as it does with the crime syndicate's connection to the church and the power of the Catholic Church. The large, the large and deified institution, and in a way maybe that's a meeting point with the institutions that the Roy family mix with in Succession, particularly the occupancy of the White House and that kind of thing. Anyway, okay, so there you go. That's just something I felt I wanted to return to that, because I thought, maybe I feel that's an interesting lens through which to view Succession, and as I say, inspired by that final scene, and in my opinion, its similarity tonally, and particularly the colour palette, the energy of it, the framing, certain scenes at the end of The Godfather 2, which they must be 50 years apart, those stories. Anyway, you can check it out for yourself and see what you think. So I did mean to talk briefly, or at least just mention the other week, share thoughts on Tina Turner's passing. And if you go back to the start of last year on the podcast, I had an episode where I spoke about watching the Tina documentary that was out last year, or at the end of the previous year, and how much I enjoyed it, and how I really enjoyed watching it, having just been kind of immersed in a very tragic story in Ireland where a young woman, a teacher, was murdered while she was out jogging, and there was a real outcry about male violence against women in Ireland, and a lot of people sharing a lot of opinions and sharing a lot of emotional opinions. And I dedicated an episode to just kind of offer my take on the complexity of those kind of dynamics and how men are viewed and male violence. And if you can go back and find that episode, it was in January of last year, because I felt there was a lack of nuance being brought into the discussion, which is always the case when people are emotional. It's very hard to remain calm and considered, and open to the many facets of a particular conflict, or or something that has caused so much pain and distress. But in the context of that episode of the podcast, I was talking about how I enjoyed coming to watch the Tina Turner documentary, which is simply called Tina, if I recall correctly, and which did cover that ground of Tina Turner escaping her very abusive, physically abusive marriage to Ike Turner. And as far as I'm concerned, it's a huge part of the Tina Turner story. It's not the most important part. It's not what defines her, but it does partially define her. And it was interesting. I was listening to a podcast. I was aware of this podcast, but I chose to listen to a few episodes just over the last week, and I've been really enjoying it. And it's simply called 60 Songs That Explain the 90s. And the presenter is an American journalist whose name is Rob Harvilla, and he does these really nicely produced podcasts, an hour to an hour and 20 minutes long, dedicated to one particular song from the 1990s that had a special a special significance culturally, and a kind of a cultural resonance, and across all genres of music. And he kind of constructs a really nice show, peppered with his own kind of anecdotes, sometimes things that do not appear to be related, but he kind of threads it all together, and a lot of stuff from his own life. He's quite self-deprecating, and usually then he seems to have each episode I listen to, he has an interview with someone for whom that particular song had a significance. So you get a kind of a history of the song, the recording, where the artist was at that moment, what the significance was to their career, all that kind of stuff. It's really, it's a nice little show. And there's a lot of songs there that I'm not familiar with, and a lot that I am, and maybe I don't know what age you'd have to be to appreciate. I mean, if you like music, that should be enough. That should be enough of a qualifier, to gain entry to that world. But very enjoyable regardless. And even if you don't know the song, it's educational. In any case, I was listening to an episode that they did on Sinead O'Connor's "Nothing Compares to You," which was her version of a Prince song, which briefly took over the world in 1990. Something that I certainly felt very proud of as an Irish person. Kind of go, wow, isn't this great? Sinead's taken it all, and she's brilliant and she's amazing. And you couldn't have a podcast episode like the one I listened to if she hadn't been as successful in America. And a female journalist came on as a guest at the end. I've forgotten her name. She writes for the New Yorker, I think. And she had written about Sinead O'Connor, and she was a self-confessed Sinead O'Connor fan, as well as a music critic. And she said something at the end, and she referred to Tina Turner. And basically she was kind of saying, I hope that, when people talk about Sinead O'Connor, that it's not like the Tina documentary, where so much was focused on her abusive relationship to Ike Turner and her sort of survival of that really horrendous relationship. I hope she'll be remembered just for her music and for being a music icon. And I thought, look, fair enough. That's a fair point. And I don't know if it's if there's any relevance to that coming from a female perspective or not. But I was thinking about it afterwards, and I thought maybe Tina, not maybe, I think a huge part of Tina Turner's story is that she survived that marriage, that she came out of that marriage and she thrived. And certainly it was clear, and the documentary was very clear in showing that Tina Turner really, very soon after leaving that relationship and forging her own kind of path, she was really reluctant to talk about Ike Turner, really reluctant to talk about the marriage, and was very clear that she did not want to do that, and said it again and again in interviews at the time. And I think eventually she did just transcend that and had a very dominant period in music in the 80s particularly, and maybe into the sort of mid to late 90s as well. Anyway, I was just kind of thinking, well, I don't know. I mean, I think the idea of survival is really powerful. And I think it really does inform a person's outlook, their character, and maybe it is an important part of somebody's legacy. And in that context, the context of sort of legacy, of being remembered, when I was thinking about that idea and thinking, well, Tina Turner, I think her ascent from hell, in terms of that marriage, in terms of the abusiveness, the nastiness, the vindictiveness, the physical violence, the sexual violence, that is, I always found that a very inspiring part of her story, and I don't know how much I knew about that, and if I only found out about it when I saw Angela Bassett portray her in the movie What's Love Got to Do With It, with Lawrence Fishburne as Ike Turner. Two really terrific performances. I can't remember when that movie came out. It must have been mid-90s. But I really only knew of Tina Turner first in in her kind of private dancer iteration, and that song What's Love Got to Do With It, and the Al Green cover Let's Stay Together, like those were the songs. So I was like, oh yeah, Tina Turner, I just thought that's how she arrived at that stage of her career, and I had no idea about the earlier stuff. Kind of is it River Deep Mountain High, and like that footage, you go back and see the footage when she was with Ike Turner, and she was just a phenomenal performer, phenomenal. And I don't think, you couldn't have Beyonce if you hadn't had Tina Turner. Like, there's such similarity in the kind of the stage presence, the energy, the moves, which Beyonce, I think, has acknowledged. You can go and find a clip of Beyonce doing a Tina Turner number, maybe, and it is that one. Is it River Deep? Am I misnaming that song? Sorry, I should have looked this stuff up beforehand. I apologise. Proud Mary. Is that the same song? I am an idiot. I apologise. But Beyonce doing Proud Mary in front of Tina Turner and, kind of a very esteemed audience. I still much prefer the Tina Turner version. I don't know. It's like I sometimes struggle with those cover versions by other super successful music performers. Like Beyonce, just give me her stuff, her doing her own stuff. I'm like, yeah, bring it on. But there was only one Tina, as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, to go back to this idea then of survival, of transcendence, of I suppose of rebirth, and like last week I was talking about maybe the idea of like retreating and escape. So retreat and escape are two different ideas, because maybe even though I incorporated them last week, the idea of escaping a particularly bad situation and overcoming it, I think that implies ascent, and the word I used a moment ago, transcendence, and they're stories that we really like. And here in Ireland, just in the last day or so, a beloved Dublin singer passed away at the age of 63 from cancer. His name was Christy Dignam, or Dignam, depending on your preference for the pronunciation. And he was the lead singer of a group called Aslan, which had a real moment in Ireland in the 80s. And Christy Dignam had a long battle with addiction and heroin addiction. But he kind of came out the other side of that, and he was a very nice guy and seemed to be very highly thought of and highly regarded, and was really a bit of that's how I would perceive it. He was kind of like a folk hero amongst kind of working class Dublin people, because that's where he came from. He came from a part of Dublin called Finglas, and he was a proud representative of that community. And indeed, I saw just a one sentence tribute online today that just simply said, goodbye, angel of the north side. So Dublin, historically, politically, socially, is divided along north-south lines, and broadly speaking, but with very obvious exceptions. The north side would have been considered sort of working class, and I don't want to say impoverished, because that paints a very particular picture, but less well off than the affluent south side. And there are very different accents and vibes between those communities, but you find echoes on either side of that north-south divide, and the dividing line is conveniently the River Liffey. The River Liffey, which is the river that flows through Dublin to the sea, from west to east. And north of the river, that's the north side, baby, and south of the river, that's the south side. Have another hino. But there you go. And so look at, my family, Southsiders, all Southsiders. And so, yeah, there's always a bit of banter, a bit of friendly ribbing. My parents have some friends, good friends, great friends from the north side, and it's always like, Northsiders. Anyway, Christy Dignam did his addiction and escaping addiction, or being a recovering addict, is that what defined him? No, he was a good guy. I think that's what defined him. He was a good guy, and he was a great interpreter of song, and there was a real gentleness and vulnerability to him. That's how I think of him, as a performer, as a person, as a singer. That stage presence, there was a vulnerability, and he was one of those singers who seemed to go on the journey with the song and be led by the song rather than driving the song. and sort of surrendered himself. And there's a vulnerability to surrender, isn't there? Now Tina Turner, different kind of energy completely. Is she defined by that, by the escaping the marriage, escaping the abuse, starting from scratch, restarting from scratch, and redefining herself and owning herself, and becoming this phenomenal solo act, regardless of whether you care for her music? And for me, there's a window, the one I referred to earlier, and after that I was less interested. But you go back and see footage of Tina anytime through 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and my God, you've just got to go unbelievable, amazing. Such a vibrancy and an energy, and power and strength. And I think that's to me what I think is beautiful about Tina Turner, was that the power, the joy, the strength that she carried in herself, and that is what I saw as the triumph. And then to ally that to her natural gifts as a singer and as a dancer, it was just a brilliant package. I found her almost impossible not to like. Anyway, so that, to stay with the idea then of survival, of legacy, of being defined by what you've overcome, being defined by what you've escaped, being defined by what you've transcended. I don't know who's doing the defining and who has the right to define you. I believe that power really rests with you. It's up to any one person to set terms for themselves. You are your own creation if you want. Now, I'm not, you don't have to take that so literally. It's not about actual reinvention, but I think for a lot of people, we can get caught up in the idea of comparison. We can get caught up in the idea of what we see as the model of happiness, the model of success, the model of inspiration, the model of transcendence. And we can fall into that trap of going, that's what I should be, or that's the path I should take. And or we can get caught up in what society presents to us and goes, this is the model. Maybe that's more, maybe that's a more accurate frame for this conversation. And if we don't fit that shape, society sort of looks at us in a perplexed way, and we have to sort of make a decision. Well, am I going to change my shape to fit what they expect, or am I going to go, it's okay, I might not have the embrace of society. I might not have that comfort of being approved of or understood. And that is a comfort. When you're approved of and when you're understood, that's comforting. That's calming. That's reassuring. And that's great if what you are doing and how you're living is close to or a product of the authentic you, whatever that might be. But if it's not, then I believe that creates a tension, because there's a performative aspect to that, and there's a satisfying of something that's farther from who you actually are or what you're actually striving for. And so that's why I think if you can find that clarity of thought around yourself and around defining yourself, if you care to define yourself at all, because what does that actually achieve, and who are you defining yourself for? I think there's great power in simply not caring, in not being worried about how you're perceived or how you're understood or how you're categorized. But that takes, I believe that takes a lot of strength. That takes a lot of self-assurance and self-belief, and it takes a healthy disregard for the opinions of others. But then you also want to have some opinions that are meaningful to you, because otherwise you're not really taking part. You're not really part of an exchange. I mean, I spoke about that a few weeks ago, like the great sort of human exchange, like the magic of that experience, of that energetic, soulful exchange with somebody else, with a friend, with a loved one, with someone close to you, the opening up and the stepping into each other's kind of spaces, to kind of go, I see, I understand. That's there's a richness there that I love when it happens. Yeah, but I think when we talk about people like Tina Turner and Christy Dignam, there is a tendency. It's very natural after people have died, because people are superstitious and they don't want to speak ill of the dead. And we can romanticize narratives, we can romanticize life stories, we can romanticize people and oversimplify, and sort of smooth out the edges. And I'm not saying this with any desire to find fault with or reason to bicker about the Tina Turner or Christy Dignam, or in fact there's other people who died this week as well. The great Cormac McCarthy, the great American novelist. I've only ever read a couple of his books, but he's a very distinctive voice, and his prose style, that kind of terse, sparse, what I would think of as very masculine writing, gave itself to a very lean style of storytelling that was all kind of sinew, sinew and tension and direct engagement with life. I felt there was no flab in a Cormac McCarthy story or a Cormac McCarthy character, and I really liked his characters, and I feel spurred now to read other books of his that I haven't, and maybe writers are not romanticized in quite the same way as performers, because performers often live in in a visual medium, even though in the case of Tina Turner and Christy Dignam, we were listening to their music. Who else died? Treat Williams, the American actor, who just a face I knew, and not someone whose films I'd actually seen a lot of. I mostly remembered him from Once Upon a Time in America, the Sergio Leone gangster movie with James De Niro and James Woods, amongst other people. A young Jennifer Connelly in that, played later in the movie as an older woman by Elizabeth McGovern. But that movie is early 80s? Not entirely successful, but Treat Williams does have a an appearance in that. I think is he a union leader who falls foul of the gangsters. Silvio Berlusconi also died. Is he the textbook corrupt politician? I don't know. The former Italian prime minister and high-ranking and highly corrupt football executive, a very dodgy head. And when I was teaching English, at any time over the last 15 years or so, anytime I met Italian students, they'd always hang their heads in shame at the mention of Berlusconi, which I always quite enjoyed. They were, we don't like him either. Anyway, what I was thinking of, and again, we're still in this area of kind of survival and legacy and overcoming. And, when I think about legacy, again, for a performer and a songwriter or a writer like Cormac McCarthy, an actor like Treat Williams, one of his movies which I've never seen and I want to is Sidney Lumet's, is it Prince of the City? Sort of a cop thriller. I do want to see that. I suppose when you're a performer, there's a legacy there in your work, or a writer, an artist, your paintings, your novels, your poetry, whatever it might be. That's the legacy. But otherwise, I think if you're just a normal punter, if you're just a normal civilian, I think legacy it's a very sort of vain area to veer into. What will my legacy be? What will people say about me when I'm dead? I've been working with a guy who has a completely unsentimental attitude to death. I've never met someone who cares less about what happens afterwards. He's like, sure, you're dead. That's it, done. Because I think I said, I thought the funeral scene in whatever episode of the last season of Succession, whatever episode that was, I was like, the funeral was quite good. And he said, I'm not really moved by any of that stuff. Sure, once you're dead, done. And it's come up a couple of times. I've never met anyone so unromantic or uninterested in the aftermath, whatever it might be. I find it quite refreshing actually to encounter that attitude. But I suppose. Legacy. That's all I'll say about legacy. I'm just like, what's the most you could hope for? That people don't have anything bad to say about you. I'm also a little bit sure, who cares? Who cares? When you're gone, and sure, what does it matter? Like what matters now, it's how the living are living with you. Not how the living live without you. It's how they live with you and what they feel about you now. I mean, that's far more pertinent, isn't it? But I was thinking also about the phrase, whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And, that can sit alongside this idea of surviving something, transcending, escaping, being able to move on after something very difficult, very challenging, very traumatic. And it's a cliche. Whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I sort of feel bullshit. I sort of feel no, not really, because sometimes the things that don't kill you leave you scarred for life. Sometimes the things that don't kill you leave you feeling embattled forever. Sometimes the things that don't kill you are like a millstone around your neck for the rest of your life. And sometimes the things that don't kill you simply wear you down over time, over years, the things that don't kill you wear you down until you're a nub, until you're a stump, until you're not even there. And I think, and I'm saying this in absolute honesty, I think like social deprivation, economic exclusion, educational exclusion, as well as personal trauma and familial trauma, generational trauma, that experience wears people down. And no, it doesn't kill you. It doesn't kill those people. It doesn't kill people from, the neglected areas of society, the underprivileged, the disenfranchised, the shut out, the shat upon, the put down upon. It doesn't kill them, but what it does is it eradicates their vibrancy, their joy, their confidence, their faith. And again, I'm not saying that. I'm not trying to go, you can't find expressions of vibrancy or faith or strength or confidence in communities that have been put down upon. And of course, there is something that emerges, something very vibrant and strong can emerge and does emerge in those communities all around the world. But in a more kind of general sense, those challenges of having to struggle constantly, of never getting that break, of never breaking through, and not having to worry about, the next bill to be paid or whatever it might be, and seeing it sort of through generation after generation, it doesn't kill you. But I really question the idea that it makes you stronger. It might make you angrier. It might make you more bitter. It might make you more cynical, more jaded, more apathetic. It might simply swallow up your heart and your joie de vivre, your enjoyment of life. So yeah, I think you can take the exceptional stories and go, look what she did, look what he did, isn't she amazing, isn't he amazing? But for many people, it's they don't get to transcend or to escape. They just get to be worn down, and they survive. And that's a very different type of survival. And I remember I used to say that kind of in a very flippant way, not cynically, but it's just an easy answer. How are you doing? Surviving. I'm surviving. And in the context of a wellness discussion or a mental health discussion, I don't want to just be surviving. I want to be thriving. Now, my model of wellness is I don't need to be thriving all the time. Sometimes I would like to thrive. And I hope that period of thriving will sustain me through a period of not thriving. And my wellness model doesn't get much more simple than that. Really. Just let me thrive a little, intermittently, but regularly. Is that if intermittent and regular aren't contradictions in terms, a little bit of regular but not constant thriving, so it sustains me. I think that's very realistic, or if not realistic, a very reasonable wellness aspiration. And further to that, what qualifies as a little bit of thriving? And I was thinking about this earlier, and I'm going to come back to this idea of joyfulness, that joy that I think was very apparent, very evident in Tina Turner when she was performing And when she was comfortable in an interview, and that kind of big smile broke out on her face, and just her vitality and her appetite for life was so sort of there. And I think that, we talk a lot about happiness. I want to be happy. But maybe joyful is more appropriate. Can you be joyful? Can you take joy from life? Can you take joy from this moment? And you see, I think if you can take joy from enough moments, they sort of add up, like joining the dots, and suddenly there's something very sustainable there. And even if you can take joy from a day or 2 days or a week, have a look at that. What made it joyful? Where were you able to find joy? I think I worked with a joy years ago in a kids show, a theatre and education show, and she was a tricky character, and we did not. It would be an exaggeration to say we got along well. So yeah, that's I've kind of I've sort of smuggled in a dad joke in there. That's not the kind of joy I was looking for. But yeah, I think, and again, I'm saying this with absolute seriousness. If you are unable to take any joy from life, you're in deep, deep trouble. I mean, really. Seek help, seek answers. I'm not talking about dancing down the street like you're leading a carnival. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about loudly greeting everyone with massive handshakes and big smiles. Where you find joy can be your own private thing. It can be small. It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be overt. It doesn't have to be performed. It doesn't have to be witnessed, for God's sake. But if you can't take joy from life, you're spending all your energy, you're spending your life force without anything restoring it. And that's a real tragedy. That's a really sad thing. And I truly hope you're not in that situation. And if you are, I don't know. Like I said, you're living a deprived life in some way, and you're depriving yourself in some way, or something in you is not permitting the entrance of joy into your life, and you may need help. I mean, ultimately, and I probably don't say it enough, considering how often I speak about areas of mental health and personal wellness. I don't say it enough that help, professional help, can be a huge part of the solution. Just to give, to help tools be found, to help resources be found, to give you a new frame through which to view the world, through which to view yourself, and that can be life changing, for the better. Certainly that was my experience when I was in therapy, and I would never rule out going back to therapy. I think there are benefits. Well, certainly it suits me. I mean, I remember when I was talking to Chiara, my wife, and when I interviewed her, and speaking about how something like music therapy can be a nice alternative to talk therapies. But as you know, as my wife likes to remind me, I like to talk. That's a safe space for me. Let's talk about it. Just don't ask me to do anything about it. I'm joking there, okay? I'm joking. But I don't know. I don't know what what is the art of living joyfully. I guess Buddhists would argue that you'll find joy if you're staying in the moment. You might find sadness as well. Maybe you'll find anger, but you'd have to be very unlucky to not experience joy as well along that road of mindfulness. But I guess, I mean, I know I did an episode in this area before, turning the joy dial. It wasn't a euphemism. But you have to be open to it, I suppose. You have to believe it's possible. You have to believe you deserve it. You have to believe that it's not just an offset, that it's a very restorative and energy-giving thing to have in your life, in whatever form that takes. Yeah, I don't know. Or is that incredibly? Do I sound incredibly patronising? Do I sound incredibly presumptuous or superior when I say that? I mean, I say it to myself. I mean, anything I'm saying to you, I'm saying to myself. But I think it's a boring structure to go, well, what I do when I'm in this situation is I try to do this, and maybe that's something you could consider doing for yourself. I don't know. It's just something I found very, very, very beneficial. I'm trying not to come from that place. I'm just saying what I believe, what I perceive in others, what I perceive in myself. And yeah, joy. I don't know. It's not for me to define what joy looks like to you. You have to work that out for yourself. But I do think, like, what's the difference between joy and happiness? Like, I'm just thinking of, like, he lived a joyous life. That's the legacy. He was such a joyful guy. I mean, I think I'd hate to meet that person. He was always happy. He was always happy. No, he wasn't. No one's always happy. It's ridiculous. It's absurd. No, that's not the way. That's not the way forward. I think maybe we differentiate happiness from joy. Happiness is maybe a concept that we conceive of in more longitudinal terms, and joy is more a momentary thing. And I suppose my argument, if I'm to listen to myself, and I have been, my argument is that accepting that joy might be the form of happiness that is more sustainable than the concept of, oh no, there's a long form happiness, like a state, a plateau I will reach, that I'll never have to come down from. For me, I just get, there's alarm bells, there's trapdoors all over that one. Whereas the momentary joy, I feel, is far more attainable and maybe truer. And it's also, I think, just to kind of round out the conversation, it's also, be comfortable with joy, but also be comfortable with sadness, with these other human experiences. And they're also momentary, moment to moment. I think an area that I probably need to look at more is when these things, and again we're back in the what doesn't kill you territory, that sometimes these things leave you altered and they take a long time to unfold themselves or to release you from their effects. And that's a hard road. That's a hard road, and one that requires a huge amount of patience. It requires a huge amount of breathing and continuing and staying with yourself and self-compassion. I think those things are useful at all times. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, look, I don't think I've anything else to say. Are you a survivor? Is that a very ominous question? It feels very loaded these days. I mean, earlier I did mean to mention when I was talking about surviving and being defined. You know, you think about the Holocaust. I think about the Holocaust. I thought about the Holocaust in the context of this conversation, and Holocaust survivors. And that is a very particular legacy. That's a very particular thing to be defined by. But that was some, you look at someone like that and you think, what did they see? What did they experience? What did they lose? At what cost? At what cost did their survival come? And that's a very heavy legacy to carry, to be a survivor of that particular tragedy. Is tragedy a very naff word to use in the context of the Holocaust? Atrocity? I don't know. I think I'm never surprised by the depth of human depravity and cruelty. I think if you were someone who was on the German side of the Holocaust experience, if you were a member of the Third Reich, of the Nazi industrial machine, I think if you survived that and retained your humanity, your faith, if you managed to access some form of forgiveness, I mean, that's impressive, isn't it? Isn't it? I mean, I applaud those people. I think anyone who overcomes something like that, regardless of which side they were on, both parties went through the experience. If you know what I mean. Again, I mean, I don't think this is the wrong end of the podcast to get into this, and maybe that's a more moral or ethical or philosophical discussion, because someone could very fairly argue, no, there's a big difference if you were a Jewish inmate rather than a Nazi jailer. If you were an officer in a concentration camp, yeah, you were a part of it and that was horrible, but very different to being someone who just missed out on being sent to a gas chamber. I mean, I recognise that, but ultimately there's you see, there's always a relationship, there's always a bond between oppressor and oppressed. And people far more articulate than me have dealt with this area, and looked at it culturally and historically, sociologically, psychologically. That's all I was trying to say. There's never just one party involved, and I think that's probably a mistake of current thinking. There's a lot of my experience, my story, and the finger pointed outwards. Look, I'd probably be able to crap on for another 45 minutes if I go too deep on that one. Let's just leave it at that, okay? But just there's always other people. There's always other people in the cosmos of pain and trauma and recrimination and legacy and survival. That's really what I believe. Now, these are all little kind of personal solar systems of pain, the administering of it or the receiving of it, but no one leaves untouched. Yeah, does that sound very bleak? Yeah, but it doesn't have to. I mean, that's not the point. That's not meant to be the concluding point. No one leaves untouched. See, so many things are survivable. That's the truth. And there is no greater survivor than the human animal. We have survived so much, and we survive so much. And only you know what you've survived. And I hope you live with the capacity for joy. That's where I'm coming from. Because I think that's the triumph. The triumph is to keep your heart in place. The triumph is to keep your hope in place. The triumph is to succeed in not passing it on to the next generation. The triumph is learning. The triumph is living with that learning. The triumph is letting go. The triumph is not necessarily forgetting. But the triumph is, keeping that ability to face the world, to face outwards from your doorstep and go, I can do this. I can do this today, and tomorrow I can do this tomorrow, and I can do it the next day. How about that? That's what I'm going to leave you with today, because that feels positive. And this is meant to be positive, what I do here. It's meant to be contributing something positive to your day, to your moment. Okay, thank you so much for listening, if you stayed with me. I hope you found something to mull over in this episode. And you can find me out there on social media. If that's your thing, you can send me some love on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube or Twitter. I barely use Twitter, to be honest. You can email me at theclearoutlive@gmail.com. I welcome the interaction. I welcome your response, your commentary. Please rate, share, subscribe, like. And if you want to go even further, you can become a patron of the show using the Patreon link. That's patreon.com/theclearout. Or you can use the supporter link if you want to make a one-off cup of coffee sized donation, or a vat of coffee, or a coffee farm sized donation. All welcome. It's up to you to decide whether it's warranted. Okay, that's it. Get out there and survive well. Survive with joy. Survive with an open heart. And I will talk to you next week. All the best. Take care. See ya. Bye.